I'm going to do a small test. Can you hear me? Excellent. So maybe I can kick it off now.
Probably best to wait till 6.
Oh, I'm a little behind. I'm sorry. Or a little early.
You can send salutations from now until 6.
All right, I'll wait.
LaShawn and SJ, I think you can go ahead and get started.
All right. Thank you very much. Good evening and welcome, beautiful people. I'm thankful to be here to share this evening with all of you. Looks like it's going to be a very exciting evening at that. Based on community input and vision, we've got some really neat stuff to share to tell you that we've heard what you've said loud and clear, and we're presenting that to you this evening. I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie Joy. Stephanie Joy. Your mute button is on.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephanie Joy from City Planning. I just want to thank you for the time that you've given and the ideas that you've shared in this design process. Zolna is going to present conceptual designs tonight and outline how you can continue to engage after this meeting. And before we hand it to Clark, I'd like to introduce Panini, my colleague. You want to say hi, Panini?
Hi, this is Panini Chaudhry. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner with Department of Mobility Infrastructure. We have some exciting bike project coming in your direction, and today I want to discuss it with you all. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Panini. I'm going to pass it to Clark from the EPA.
Thanks, Stephanie Joy. Yes, I'm Clark Wilson. I'm with the Office of Community Revitalization here in Washington, D.C. I'm joined virtually tonight with my colleague from my office, Hollis May Key, and our colleague in the Philadelphia office, Betty Barnes. Some of you have probably heard my spiel before, but we're a very small office in the Office of Policy at EPA that does technical assistance with communities on how they can grow and in a more sustainable and inclusive manner. And we provide a suite of technical assistance programs, one of which is the Greening America's Communities program. And the point and the reason why we do this program is to either initiate conversations in communities or build off of already existing conversations in communities that they're having about how to make their neighborhoods more livable, more environmentally friendly, more bikeable, more walkable, just all around, just more pleasant. And in Pittsburgh's case, we're building off of the work that city planning and your different neighborhood groups have already been doing on your neighborhood planning initiatives and your green corridors initiatives. So what we're presenting tonight is also, they're not final designs. I'm just going to keep repeating this. This is all about just continuing conversations that neighborhoods are having and that you've been having the past few weeks. And I agree with LaShawn, there's been a lot of great input given. But by no means are these meant to be final in any ways. This is something for you all then to have as a document, have as ideas that you then can build off of. So if you want to advance one. So each year we focus on a particular aspect of how to make our neighborhoods more livable and by using green infrastructure. This year, our office partnered with the Heat Island Mitigation Program in our Office of Air and Radiation here to look at how you can do street design and green infrastructure design to start kind of getting those temperatures down. Things are only getting hotter out there, and especially in the cities, they're very hot. And I know that in Pittsburgh, I mean, one of the reasons why we awarded you this technical assistance is that you have documented evidence that things are really getting hot in Pittsburgh. We've only given 4 awards a year. So Pittsburgh is joined this year by Birmingham, Alabama, the Shoshone-Bannock tribes in Idaho, and Bernalillo County in New Mexico. So those are your cohort for this year. For the Green America's Communities program, we also hire landscape architects who have expertise and skill in the design of green infrastructure and incorporating into neighborhood and street design. And this year, we're happy to say that we hired Flora Teeter landscape architects based out of Baltimore and Pittsburgh. And tonight, you'll be hearing from Zolna Russell and Jeremy Frederick with Flora Teeter. Take it away, Zolna.
Thank you, Clark. Sorry, it took me a minute there to get unmuted. And good evening, everybody. We are absolutely thrilled to be here. And so far, it's been a really great design process. We've had a lot of input and have gotten some amazing feedback. And the image here just shows some of the people that have participated in the design and planning process. So we've had a number of residents and citizens of Manchester Chateau who have had conversations with us in the small stakeholder meetings, as well as bringing feedback on the Engage Pittsburgh website. And if you haven't looked at that, I would encourage everyone to do so. The address is scattered throughout the presentation here, and we'll show you what we've heard so far. Clark introduced the EPA Greening America's Communities team, and for Flora Teeter, myself, I'm the project manager for the Greening America's Communities project. I'm also a landscape architect and director of sustainability here at Flora Teeter. Jeremy, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure, Jeremy Frederick with Flora Teeter, and I head up the Pittsburgh office.
And then we're also joined by Matt Ellingson, who is our landscape designer and who's done all the amazing images you'll see this evening, as well as Sarah Goins, who's our marketing director and StreamYard guru. So as Clark and Jeremy have both mentioned, we do have an office in Pittsburgh, so we're very excited to be working with everyone in the city. So here's our agenda for this evening. We've introduced the team. We're going to give you a brief overview of our process so far, look at some of the comments we've received from the Engage Pittsburgh website and also from the small stakeholder groups, and then show you the 2 areas that have been chosen for conceptual designs, and then review those design ideas. Then Panini is going to give a presentation about some of the things that are happening or about to happen in Manchester Chateau, and then we'll have a discussion. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, please do put them in the chat on Facebook, and we will be able to answer them as part of this meeting. If you think of something later, feel free to use the Engage Pittsburgh website to provide comments, or you can provide comments directly to LaShawn, either via email or put comments in the Manchester Citizens Corporation mailbox. And also, if anyone out there would like or know somebody who would like a hard copy of the presentation, we can also provide those to LaShawn, so that's available as well. So this is a schedule that we've had to date. We opened up the Engage Pittsburgh website about a week before our first public meeting because we wanted people to tell us, what are your challenges and treasures of the Manchester Chateau neighborhoods, and we did get some great feedback. After that, we had a first public meeting where we identified model strategies that could be used along the entire project corridor. And then we went back to the Engage Pittsburgh website to ask people to locate the strategies in the place via a mapping exercise. While all that was happening, we had a series of small stakeholder meetings, which were really great because it allowed us to dig into some pretty specific topics. And the topics we talked about were green infrastructure and industrial uses, connections and mobility, placemaking, stewardship, and performance. And the people who were involved in those conversations were, city folks, agency folks, local property owners, residents. So we had kind of a broad range of people providing feedback in that way. And so that brings us to tonight, which is the second public meeting where we will show you our design concepts that we developed.
Yeah, and to begin as Olna said, to begin our virtual outreach process, we asked residents and stakeholders to provide general feedback on your neighborhood in the form of this treasures and challenges map on the Engage Pittsburgh website. We were looking for existing assets to build upon and identifying areas and issues that might be in need of planned improvements. Collectively, you provided 27 markers and comments ranging in location and content. We will document all of these comments in full, which will be carried through to the final memo. And we've created a summary here as they apply to the scope of the project in our 3 major focus areas of Chateau, the Underpass, and Manchester. And if I can just pick out a few from here, specific ones. For example, in Chateau, it was voiced that the Heritage Trail is narrow and destabilizing. Someone mentioned that there was a lot of concrete and it just felt like there was a need for more greening. In the Underpass area, it was voiced that it was dangerous for both pedestrians and vehicles. The traffic patterns there. More call for tree plantings as part of the program that you all have been continuing along Route 65. And a couple from Manchester is the sidewalks are buckling from tree roots. Improvements at community parks and community spaces that are existing would make a big impact. And another one was enhanced buffering from the rail corridor. So that's some of the flavor of the content that we received in the markers. Go ahead, next one's on.
Yeah, and if you do want to see more specifically the comments, that you can click on all those little markers on the website and then read what everybody had said.
So as we look at how we can apply those comments to the design priorities from the project outset, it's really great to confirm that that alignment of project stakeholder concerns and project objectives. And really, it's no coincidence since the neighborhood plan has informed the focused areas of the project, and the neighborhood has informed the neighborhood plan. So really, this is your neighborhood plan at work, which is really something to celebrate. Go ahead.
So as I mentioned, we did, Jeremy, do you mind muting?
Yep.
Thank you. We did develop a number of model strategies. And the reason we did that rather than jump right into planning is because it is a long corridor and the character is quite different in Manchester from Chateau, as I'm sure you know. And we really don't like to go ahead and make assumptions about things. So we do want to have community input to inform the process. So we came up with these 11 model strategies and then put that on the Engage website. And then the sites were chosen based on where we had the most interest based on the comments on the Engage website.
Yep, and as Zolna said, we provided the interactive map to see which strategies seemed appropriate for your neighborhood and where they might be the best fit. In total, 21 markers were placed, which really provided a data set for us to understand your priority locations and the strategies of greatest interest that we provided. So just to pull out a few again, tree plantings were placed in Chateau, again echoing the need for increased canopy in that neighborhood, along Route 65 and in front of the elementary school. Traffic calming was placed at Chateau Rush in front of the elementary school with notes that traffic in front of the school can be dangerous at times. Road diet markers were placed at the Chateau and Layden diet, Beaver Avenue underpass, indicating, I think at the lane diet, someone had indicated that the striping is a great first start, but adding some features of permanence would be desirable. Also, green infrastructure was placed in a few areas where localized flooding was noted. Wayfinding and branding was placed from the underpass to the river, which echoes something we've been talking about. And then waterfront confluence, of course, placed at the end of Franklin with notes for interest in small vessel boat launch. So again, great feedback, and we appreciate the participation.
So you can really see where the interest is clustered, and we'll talk about where we've actually chosen the sites in a second, but that feedback was really instrumental in not only choosing the sites, but also deciding what we would design for the sites. And so were the information that we received in the small stakeholder meetings, which, that's where we get to dig into a lot of detail. So not only did the small stakeholder meetings inform where the concepts were located, but also the levels and types of intervention, as well as we got a lot of really great information about maintenance and stewardship and potential funding sources. So all those things will be included in our final memo. So now the big unveiling. One thing that we've heard a lot is that Manchester feels very disconnected from Chateau. And the character of Manchester is very historic and very residential, and Chateau is very industrial. So what we felt was really needed were unifying elements that could be carried through both Manchester through the underpass into Chateau. So those things are things that are really a little bit low-hanging fruit, things like the brick sidewalks in Manchester, providing site furniture in both Manchester and Chateau that's the same, that provides a unifying element, consistent lighting throughout, both on the Manchester streets and then all the way through to Chateau, providing better bike facilities, whether they're bike lanes or sharrows, again, to create that very important connection. So you'll see that in all of these plans. And the design locations that were selected were the underpass with about a small piece of the Juniata Street streetscape. There's already a lane diet on Chateau, so that's already contributing to the mitigation of traffic there. And then the second site is along North Franklin in Chateau. That area seemed to have a lot of potential in terms of, as everybody's mentioned, it needs a lot of greening. There's not a lot happening there, so it could use activation. And I'm sure everybody knows that if and when the Esplanade development comes online, then things will be a lot different and there'll be a lot more activity there. So there's a lot of opportunity to explore some interesting ideas. So the first site is the underpass, and we are calling it the connection because it really does restore the connection between Manchester and Chateau, or create a connection, where there used to be one neighborhood. So this is an adaptation of one of the model strategies. What we heard from the small stakeholders and the feedback that the model strategy was just a little bit too much intervention, in the sense that it really changed the traffic patterns and was going to require a lot of traffic planning and other infrastructure changes. So we kind of scaled it back a little bit to keep the lanes more or less as they are. We have narrowed them a little bit, which will also provide a little bit of traffic calming, but it still provides the same turning radii for large trucks and other large vehicles. We have provided a very strong pedestrian connection through the underpass. You can see on Juniata, we have shown curb bump outs, which continue around to where the lane diet is already existing, which allows us to put some trees and some green infrastructure. It gives a more of an area of refuge for pedestrians and narrows the crossing. There are crosswalks throughout. The brick is carried through in the underpass along with ornamental pavers, and then continues on here. This is very well lighted, so there's a lot of lighting included. You can see there are also benches included, plenty of space for pedestrians and bicyclists to feel comfortable. 2 low walls on either side, which can be used for branding or for decorative purposes. And then, like I said, that continues. We took 1 lane out of Beaver here to also slow the traffic, and then created a crosswalk to really create a much more comfortable connection. So this is what it looks like now. As you can see, it's not very inviting. It seems very dark under the underpass. A lot of people have commented that it doesn't feel safe, either from a safety perspective or from an actual pedestrian use perspective. So this is what it might look like. And we've looked at it both in the daytime and in the evening, so you can see what it looks like with the lighting. But we've provided bollards here that have lights on them. It's a much wider pedestrian way. These are the low walls I had referred to. These show the bump outs, and so you can see that the crossing feels much more accessible. That could be accompanied with pedestrian lights further up Chateau to let people know somebody's crossing. The lights that are included and furnishings are included throughout the corridor here. And then the potential for branding of the neighborhood or signage on the bridge as well as on the abutments can really create a branding or a wayfinding for people coming from Manchester through Chateau and vice versa. Oops. This is what it might look like at night. So the signage is lit, there's lighting underneath, you can see through, so it's much more inviting to be able to come back and forth at all hours of the day and night and feel safe. The second site we've called tongue-in-cheek Trailer Park, and I'll tell you why in just a minute. So this is the existing condition of North Franklin Street looking towards Preble. It is a very industrial area. There's a lot of active business there that involves large tractor trailers, lots of traffic. So the roads are very wide, which seems very intimidating. There's not a lot of pedestrian amenities here. So what we've done on North Franklin Street is looked at it both from a weekday perspective and from a weekend perspective, because what we heard from some of the people that are there is that the trucks and the industries, operate fairly heavily during the week, but on the weekend they don't. So the streets are pretty empty, and it gives an opportunity to kind of activate on a more of a timed basis than on a permanent basis. So on the weekday, you can see the brick walks continue down on North Franklin with crosswalks, and then there's an actual dedicated bike lane here between the sidewalk and the parking lane. The parking lane is treated with pavement, decorative pavement markings to just designate that as sort of a special place, because on the weekends, that is where the park, that becomes the park. So the enhancements continue the connection between Chateau and Manchester, but they also allow everything to go on as it is now and allows the business to operate, but it's still a more friendly connection from Manchester to the river. But on the weekends, there's the potential to close the street from Preble Avenue to Metropolitan Street, or potentially even to Beaver, and really activate this. And what we're proposing to do that is the trailer park. These are 3 small portable parklets built on tractor trailers that you can move in on the weekends, and there's plenty of infrastructure to move those in and out in that neighborhood, as well as plenty of parking to store them during the week. But one of them is intended to be a food and beverage park, so it will have a little, kitchen. It can be a pop-up, a little bar, seating. All of these are have ramps to make them accessible for people. The second trailer park is a stage for performances or for informal seating. And the third one is a little parklet. So you can see they are shown parked here, and then these, the roads could be closed so people could, hang out, do cornhole, have movable seating. And this is what that might look like. So you can see the trailer parks, with people hanging out in them, lots of people in the street. The connection to the river becomes much more accessible at that point. And it really does activate the neighborhoods. So we've shown tree planting where it is possible. In Chateau, there's a lot of many driveways and overhead lines there. So the opportunity for that is limited. But between the sidewalks and the bike lane, it does kind of make that connection and lead you through. So I'm going to take a little break. We have some comments and questions here, so I thought we'd kind of answer them. The first comment from Erwin Mendelson is, what role could green alleys play as part of green infrastructure? Manchester is one of a handful of neighborhoods with flat streets for which this would be a huge asset. And by green alleys, the model that comes to mind is Montreal, although there's been a great work done in the US. And if you are familiar with green alleys, I assume what you're talking about, Erwin, is when you actually close the alley and use it more as a community space than an alley. Sometimes they're closed, as we're proposing with North Franklin, in certain time periods, and in some places they've actually gated the alleys and they become part of the residential. So Stephanie Joy, I'm going to let you address this since you.
I will just interject too that green alleys are also, they were pioneered too in Chicago, and they put together a great manual on green alleys. And it also means that they're, typically low volume streets, typically pervious pavings. And so what Chicago's done, and I presumably in Montreal too, has replaced those pavings with more permeable pavings, or have put in like pavers or things like that actually become sort of a stormwater management system as well as,
and sometimes they're called blue alleys as well when they're really focused on water infiltration.
Yeah, so we don't, in city planning, I mean, there are some neighborhoods that do have, activated alleys, particularly in the central north side. And people have talked about green infrastructure and bikeways through our alleys in Manchester. But, it's a possibility, I think, with, mechanisms that Clark mentioned. But I might actually defer to Panini from the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure to add further thought to that, because it will have to remain a connection.
Any comment, Panini?
You guys cover more or less all the important portions. So yeah, I actually don't have anything to add on.
I mean, the alleys in Manchester are very interesting, and people do live on them, so the access is important. So I think it would probably depend on the width of each of those alleys and on an individual level.
But that's certainly an idea that the neighborhood could explore as, plans progress. And then there were a number of comments about the choice of paving material. The reason we chose brick is because it is sort of indicative of Manchester, and Renee raised a concern about bricks becoming a trip hazard, and it just really depends on how the bricks are installed and on what the substrate is. So I would assume that any new sidewalk would include a concrete base, which would make the bricks more stable over the long term. And as we spoke about in our last meeting, any tree planting that would be installed in conjunction with the bricks would have a much more generous tree pit and adequate soil volume so that the trees wouldn't have to push up the sidewalk as they are now. And then there was also a couple comments on the lighting. So lighting is needed and was positively received. There was a comment on disrupting nocturnal wildlife. Ideally, all the lighting would be considered dark skies. That is, it would be pointed down and directed to the places where it's needed and not up in the sky to disturb birds and other wildlife. So we're very, very conscious of that. And it would assume that would be how it would be designed. So I'm going to thank you for those comments. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an update about what's coming next, and then I'm going to turn it over to Panini. So this is our project timeline, and if you were on the last meeting, you'll know we did start prior to COVID. We were days away from our public meeting, and then COVID intervened, so we've picked it up. We had our first public meeting about a month ago, and this is our second public meeting and our last public meeting. I do want to also remind everybody that the comment period for the Engage website will be open for a couple more weeks. So if you know someone that had to miss the meeting or you want to revisit it and provide us with more comments, that will be available. And then Flora Teeter will be providing a narrative memo which summarizes the whole process, including the design concepts that you've seen here. And this is what's included in the final memo. And as I did mention earlier, part of our small stakeholder groups, we're talking about funding and stewardship. So part of our memo will be a funding spreadsheet, which will document everything we heard and then maybe include some more opportunities for grants and other funding to help make this a reality. So Panini, I'll let you take it away. Do you want to share your screen, or do you want me to screen? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, you should be able to share it.
Okay, can you see the screen now? The presentation?
Clark, can you see it?
Clark, can you see it? It cannot see it.
Okay, let me try and pull it up. How's that? Can everyone see that? So just let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
Thank you, Zolna. First of all, I want to thank DCC, DCP, MCC, EP, and Flora Teacher for organizing this excellent presentation and excellent design. The reason Domi wants to piggyback with this project is this is like the project where it ends. This project, that's where actually we're starting for our Move Forward PGS project. Next slide, please. Yeah, so what is Move Forward PGS project? In this Move Forward PGS project, we are actually focusing on creating complete street, mostly by bike lane instruction. And when we're talking about bike infrastructure, it's not actually just putting bike lane per se. It's making the road safer for all mode of transportation. It's whether the pedestrian, it's whether the bicyclist and everyone. And that philosophy actually we gather from the basic goal that Domi believe. Our first goal is we believe that no one should die traveling our city street. And so we are working towards to make our roads safer. The second goal Domi believe strongly is if your trip is less than 20 minutes, we really shouldn't use our motor vehicle. So we need to create infrastructure. We need to create facilities so that people can walk and bike on those small travel distance. Our third goal, we want to bike and walking enjoyable for the city, a city where almost 30 to 35% of the people actually bike, not for commuter purpose, for recreational purpose. And almost 48% of the trip daily the city make is less than 3 miles. So a lot of the trip that we have in our road can be easily be done by either by walking or biking. And we can take out the motorized vehicle out of the road because a city like old city like Pittsburgh, it's really difficult for our road to expand. And creating new mode and creating a cohesive mode of transportation system is the only way we can actually manage the future demand. So our fourth goal is we believe like no household should spend more than 45% of their household income for basic housing and mobility issue. Like if you, instead of driving, if you can rely on biking or walking, it's not gonna cost you. So we wanna focus on those. And the fifth goal and the last one is we want our streets and the right of way reflect the values of our community. Next slide, please. So the Move Forward PGH project is actually initiated from the Pittsburgh Bike Plus plan. That's actually started something around 2014 to 15. That's close to a 5-year long plan that we have developed. There were almost 750 people engaged. We went through all the communities through this Bike Plus plan to better understand the community need. And the end result is almost 123-mile planned on-street bike facilities that we are proposing through the Move Forward PGH project. And our Bike Plus project, the reason we are putting instead of Bike Plus, because we are also trying to facilitate the e-scooter and also the micro mobility facilities that we have here. We want to create infrastructure that will cover those mode of transportation also. As you can see on your right, there is the proposed north side, that study area that I'm going to talk about today. Sometimes, like when we go to the presentation, every time we hear that, like if you do only this quarter mile, what will happen? So that's the reason actually I want to put this map in there just to give you the idea that all this project that we are implementing, this is actually part of a much larger and greater network. And Manchester Shadow neighborhood is actually a premium location, premium connection location for the north side. Next slide, please. A little bit about this Move Forward PGS project. This is an initiative from the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure of City of Pittsburgh. And we also have two nonprofit partners, Healthy Ride and Bike PGH. And Some of this project are grant funded, and some of this project are from the city operating budget, and so it's a mixed bag of funding for this Move Forward PGS projects. Next slide, please. The most important question that we go, like whenever we go for presentation, we say that the facilities that we are making, like whether people can use it and what's the percentage of people can actually use these facilities. But what FSW study has found, like 51 to 56% of the people are interested but concerned that whether this facility is safe for bicycles. So like every time, generally we hear that why the motorists can't share the road with the cyclists. This 51 to 56% of the people is those people who won't share the street, simply not safer. They don't consider it safer for their daily movement. We have 5 to 9% of the total population who believe that they're somewhat confident, right? They will ride with what type of facilities you want to throw at them. And then there are 4 to 7% of the population who are very comfortable, highly confident. They will even ride on the shoulder of a freeway if they have to. Move Forward PGS strongly believe that 51 to 56% of the population who are interested but concerned, all ages and all abilities, they should be able to bike. They should be able to walk safely and freely in our city. And that's why we are moving forward with our this initiative. Next slide, please. When we talk about the bike facilities type, there are, if you have a lower stress corridor, you can focus on very minor countermeasures like neighborhoods to a very strong measure like shared use path. Is based on the stress, level of stress on your city, level of stress on your road. Especially for north side, we are blessed that most of the roads that we have in our corridor are not very high stress corridors. So that's why we are very confident that the project that we will introduce today and ask for comments from you, recommendation from you, will be something very fruitful and be very effective for people of all ages and all abilities will be able to use those facilities. Next slide, please. So next slide. So before going to the specific projects, we are gonna introduce 8 projects today. I wanna talk about a little bit about the bigger picture of what's gonna happen in the 2020-2021 in the north side. As you can see on the bottom side, we have total a cluster of 8 projects that are closer to Manchester Shadow, California Kirkbride, those neighborhood areas. We are going to introduce those projects today. And as you can see, they are already programmed for 2021 bike infrastructure. We already have working going on Marshall Avenue and also in the East Street for bike lane. Those are the 2020 project. And all these facilities ultimately will get connected to Brighton Road and will go up to the Riverview Park. So as you can see, all these facilities from the north and the east side, when they want to get connected to the backbone of our bike infrastructure, that means the Three Rivers Trail, Manchester Shadow neighborhood is the most prominent location, which will flow all this traffic to the bike trail. Next slide, please. A little bit zoom up for this, the 8 project that we are proposing today. The first one is West North Avenue. That study scope will be from Manhattan Street to Brighton. The second one will be Brighton Road. It will be from West North Ave to California Ave. We have 2 more projects coming on California Ave that will go up to Marshall, which will get connected to the Marshall Avenue project that already in the design phase for the 2020. We have 2 more projects coming up from the east-west direction. One is from Manhattan and the other one is Fulton Street. Both of them will start in Western Ave and will get connected into Juniata. And then we have another connection from Columbus Avenue that will connect the Manhattan Street to the California. So as you can see, Manhattan and Juniata streets are really the 2 most important corridor that we have that will actually flow the traffic from east side. Manhattan will connect North Ave, Pennsylvania, California, Columbus Ave through Fulton Street. And all those connections will get connected on the upper side to the River Park Trail. And for the east-west north-south direction, you have Fulton and Manhattan connection. They will ultimately will get connected to the Three River Trails through Beaver Avenue and North Franklin Street. And that's the reason actually we are here today with this EPA project, to introduce all this project, to see like where they're ending. Actually, that's exactly where we're starting. And this is a complete cohesive project for the whole north side. Next slide, please. Before going to the little bit detail, I want to talk about a little bit about the demographic and the community character of the neighborhood. In the previous slide, you have seen that the 8 corridor that we have selected for today's presentation, they mostly cover 3 track group. So we collected the data from the American Community Survey to better understand the community, better understand the population, better understand their commuting characteristics. If you look at the age group, you will see that this is a beautiful combination of age group. This is not those neighborhood where only the young population live, or this is not one of those neighborhood where just the older population group is very heavy. This is one of those legacy neighborhood where people live generation after generation, and bike facilities for all ages and all type is the most appropriate format for a neighborhood like this. On average, 20% of the household of this track group that we have found that household with 0 vehicles. So for those household, a bike facilities is not something for a recreation. It's actually their work trip. When it comes to the drive alone mode, only 44% of the household people actually drive their mode alone. So you have almost 56% of the people of this track group where actually they rely on other mode of transportation, whether it's public transit, whether it's walk, whether it's bike. When it comes to the work-related bike trip, 3% of the people actually do the work trip. But we know that almost 70% of the city trip, bike trip that we have for the city are initiated from recreational trip rather than work trip. So that number kind of makes sense. And why we need this connection, that will be answered with the next 2 facts. Like if you look at 28% of the daily trip that this area generate are less than 2 miles. When we are considering less than 3 miles, 38% of the trips are actually generated less than 3 miles. And all this trip can be easily made if we have a very strong and safe bike infrastructure placed in the road. A little bit about the neighborhood characteristics when it comes to the racial diversity. Manchester is predominantly African-American community, but when it comes to the central north side and Kirkbrand, it's pretty much a mixed. Next slide, please. So from here to the next 8 slide, we will talk about each of the corridor. And this time we actually want to introduce the project a little bit different way. Next slide, please. As you can see, generally when a city initiate any kind of project, we generally come up with a design to the community and then request respond and go along with the design. And what we have found that it create actually more problem than solution. So this time we want to empower our stakeholders. We want to let them understand that what are the factors we look into the road, and we want to introduce that to our stakeholder, and that our expectation is all this information will help them to create a well-informed decision making. And based on the decision, based on the recommendations, suggestions we get from the community, then we will go to the design board and we'll start drawing. So then comes the question that what are the factors we look into? As a daily commuter, we know our road, but when it comes to the design, there are some factors that maybe our stakeholders are not very much aware. And that's where actually DOMI comes into play. For all the project, we actually created this kind of, as you can see for the Brighton corridor, we have created this type of information sheet which contain all the road, width, ADT, bike facilities, information like that. And based on all this information, at the end, you will see that we are recommending some sort of like a possible improvement. Please keep in mind that these are not any design, or this is not a final decision or anything. This is just a possible improvement we have seen in different part of the city. We have seen different part of the country from our research. So we just want to share it with you, so help you better understand the decision. What are the factors we actually do when we consider this type of bike facilities? What type of bike facilities we should put in the road? The first one is definitely the most important one, the road width. If you don't have enough width in the road for putting bike facilities, you definitely won't be able to put the facilities in there. You want to look into the daily traffic. You don't want to make the pedestrian and cyclists share the road with a very heavy traveled road. But when it comes to the ADT is like less than 3,000, 2,500, low stress connection. That's something's possible. What other things you want to see? You want to see whether people are using that specific facilities. The 8 location that we are introducing today, some of them actually doesn't have any kind of bike facilities. So the question might arise that why we are proposing those connection. Since there is no connection, maybe people are not using. So that's the reason we collected data through Strava app. At this moment, because of COVID and lack of manpower, it's not possible for us to collect field data for all the study area. But for the time being, we relied on Strava app. As you know, the bicyclists heavily use the Strava app. So it's kind of gave us the idea whether those connections are whether being used or not. So these numbers, they don't necessarily reflect the level of usage or frequency of the link rather than whether people are actually using the link or not. You definitely want to look at the safety stuff, whether how safe is your road. So we put that crash information also in there. When you're talking about some sort of protected facilities, you always have to look about whether the transit facilities are on the road or not. So that information also put in there. And the most important part for city of Pittsburgh is parking. Whenever we introduce any facilities, we have to tackle this very difficult question of parking. We also try to gather some parking data also, so that all this project can give you a holistic idea what's going on there that will eventually help you to make some decision. I will quickly go through all this project a little bit so that you can get an idea how we should be able to use this data. Say, for example, Brighton Road. You have a 40-feet road and the ADT of something around like close to 8,000. So it's a pretty busy road. And you have also a heavy usage of bike trips. The road has almost 33 crash between 5 years, 3 pedestrian and 1 bicycle related trip. You also have a transit corridor in there. Parking, moderate, I would say. The most of the demand that we have seen is close to Freedmore Street and Right Way. So what type of facilities we can consider for this road? This is a road close to a 8,000 vehicle and pretty people are using frequently. So you definitely don't want bicyclists to share this road if possible. So, and you have 40-feet road. So what type of facilities you can do? You can consider a 2-way protected bike lane. That's only a 10 feet and it will take one side of the road and you still have the both lane and you always have the parking lane. Next slide, please. For the California F corridor we have from Brighton to Marshall, that road has something around 30 to 40 feet wide. That's also moderately busy road, something around the ADT we got is 6,500. People are using that road for bike trips. For 4 months, we got something around 900 trips through Strava. Safety-wise, it's not the most vulnerable road, I would say. It's only 12 crashes, 1 pedestrian crash. You have Transit Road 13 to gone there. Most of the parking that we have seen on that corridor of 0.8 mile, it's like 25 vehicle and on that specific timeline, by the way. And most of the highest demand segment that we have seen observed is close to USPS surrounding location. So what are the possible alternatives that we can work in there? We can consider some sort of bike lane, buffered bike lane. If bike lane is not an option here, we can look into the traffic calming measures, which is known as neighbor ways. We can look at the speed humps, visual narrowing, pavement marking, or road with reconfiguration related work for California. But these are just the possible improvement option. Like I said, this is not some hard and fast recommendation we are putting. We want to hear from our stakeholders what they were thinking based on this information and their daily usage of that corridor. Next slide, please. The third corridor that we want to introduce is North 8th Corridor from Manhattan Street to Brighton Road. That's a 0.6 mile long road, something around road width 30 to 37. That's a very heavy parking demand location. Most of the houses that we have on that corridor doesn't actually have any kind of off-street parking facilities. So definitely any kind of bike facilities that will disrupt the parking location is not something we want to recommend. We believe a location like this can be a very effective candidate for neighborway. It can be speed humps. It can be the mini traffic circle for the intersection, especially in the Allegheny Ave. We have seen a cluster of crashes there. Visual narrowing, curb extension, issues like choker, chicane, or pavement marking improvement. This all can be very much effective without putting any kind of bike facilities and make the road safer for all users, whether it's motorists, whether it's bicyclists, and whether it's pedestrian. Next slide, please. The next corridor that we want to introduce is the East-West Corridor, North-South Corridor. It's the Fulton Street Corridor from Western Ave to Juniata Avenue. That's a 0.45 mile long. The road width is close to 24 feet one way, and that gives us the opportunity of creating some sort of bike facilities there, because since it's a one-way road, you can easily put a bike facilities one way with a parking facilities in there. Even if we cannot put the bike facilities in there, we could do the traffic calming to make the road safer for the bicyclists. It can be the speed hump, it can be the visual narrowing, or issues like pavement marking or signage improvement. This simple improvement also can make a huge impact to ensure safety of our road. Next slide, please. The next corridor is the Columbus Avenue corridor from Manhattan Street to California Street. That's a 0.25 mile long corridor. This is also a heavily used road when it comes to the bicyclists, though the bike trips count is showing something around 700 trips, but our field observation have seen that more than every day, a lot of people are using actually this corridor. This is a very calm location. Inside neighborhood, only 3,400 vehicle crossing there. Have only 7 crashes, so it's not a very high crash-prone location per se. But parking is a very major factor for a location like Columbus Avenue. So it can be, we can create one-side parking, one-side opening for a vehicle, or we could go with the traffic calming measure for this type of locations also, since this is not a very high-speed corridor and have a very intense parking demand. Next slide, please. The next corridor that we want to talk about is the Manhattan Corridor. This is from Western Avenue to Juniata. That's also a 0.45 mile long road, 25 feet average width. But the good thing is that's also one-way road. So you actually have enough road there. But the other important thing that we have observed, especially from Page Street to North Ave, there is actually huge demand of parking. And you also have a transit route 17 or 18. So any kind of protected bike facility is probably not something our stakeholder want to see on this road. And we also don't want to recommend. But we will recommend that any kind of neighborhood facilities that can calm the traffic and make the road safer will be a very appropriate countermeasure that we can cover for Manhattan Corridor. Next slide, please. The last corridor that I want to talk about is the Juniata Road corridor. It will start from Chateau Street and in Fulton Street. This is like exactly where the EPA project at EPA DCP project is ended. That's a 0.2 mile long road width is something around 30 feet. And the traffic is also not too much. It's like 2,700 traffic you have in there. But this is also a heavily used corridor for the bike facilities. We have seen 400 trips from Strava data alone happen. Crash-wise, it has only one crash, so it's not safety hazard per se, that corridor. What type of facilities we can consider for this? First of all, we have to look into the parking data. And what we have seen is like it is a high demand segment, especially the intersection vicinity of Manhattan Street. So our recommendation can be that we could create one side parking and the other side we can open it for the bike facilities, or we could do traffic calming project incorporated with the pavement marking improvement also. Next slide, please. So these are the 8 projects that I want to introduce to you all today. And as you can see, we are not here today to give you any concrete design. We are not here today to tell what we should put in your community, in your road. We just want to share our information, that the access that we have, and we want to gather the information that you have as a daily user of those roads. What should be the most appropriate countermeasure that we can take on those roads that can make those roads safer for both motorists and bicyclists, and also the pedestrian who are going to cross that road. For the comment period, we have 2 different platforms at this moment. Unfortunately, due to COVID, it's not possible for us to go in person to the community and collect comment at this moment. So we have created 2 pages. One is the Engage PGH page. I will drop down the link after the presentation in the comment section. And also the link is available in the presentation that will be available after the meeting. And also we have 1 page for Move Forward PGH where you can put your comments. In the Engage PGH page, there is an interactive map in place that you can use to use marker the same way that we did for Manchester and Chateau. Our comment period will begin from today, and we are expecting a 1-month comment period from the people. And after the recommendations, suggestions that we collect from the stakeholder, based on that, we will move to the design phase and probably come again and show you what we are designed for this project. With that, I'm going to wrap up my presentation. I hope I earned the privilege of your time. Thanks a lot for hearing me. Stay safe, stay blessed. Thank you.
Thank you, Panini. That was great. Sounds like you guys need to get to that Engage Pittsburgh website. There's a lot of things on there that you can comment on. So I'm just going to go back to the other presentation, and happy to have more comments, or if anyone wants to go back and look at the plans that we've shown, we're happy to do that, happy to answer any questions. And the presentation will also be posted on the Pittsburgh website, so it'll be available after the fact there for you to spend more time with it. So I just wanted to point out to Panini that a lot of people have commented specifically on some of the characteristics of the different streets that you've been talking about. So if you can take a look at that, and again, if anyone wants to translate those comments to the other 2 websites he mentioned, that would probably be a great idea too.
Question per se, or more of an observation?
Let me just run through them. So there's some questions about moving the bike infrastructure to different streets. Sheffield, a question about traffic calmings for people turning the corner from North Franklin to Fulton. Visibility is minimal and pretty speedy coming around the corner. So I guess that's a point that people don't feel safe. And then Renee pointed out that neighbors need parking on Juniata and churches use parking on Juniata for the weekends. So I'm happy to forward you those comments after the fact as well. So does anyone else have comments or questions? Anyone who's watching our Facebook Live, please put your comments in the chat, or I'd like to invite any of our other presenters if there's anything they'd like to add.
Well, I was just going to say, we will update the Engage page with this video in the next day or 2, and we'll continually update that page with the memo and keep MCC informed. So, if you have questions, feel free to reach out to LaShawn or myself. We're happy to share information, and we really do appreciate your time and and input in the process.
Yeah, I'd like to also echo that. We do appreciate all the feedback that we've had. It's been very helpful in coming up with these concepts. So we really hope that you guys like what we've come up with. But any feedback, of course, is always welcome. So please do leave it for us. All right. If there's nothing else, then I'm going to wrap up the broadcast. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we hope to hear from you on one of the other venues. Have a good evening.
Good night.